gender equality. My name is Alice Brisset, and I'm part of the marketing team at Orange Silicon Valley. I'll be leading our session today along with guest speaker Lucina Dimeco and Paula Uniac. Before we get started, let me set the scene. Today's session is part of our webinar series called Business Resilience in All Times that Orange is organizing to support business leaders during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. A few words about Orange Silicon Valley. We've been participating in the Silicon Valley ecosystem for 20 years through investment, strategy, and technological innovation with a team of 45 subject matter experts focusing on 17 areas of digital innovation. So today's topic is gender equality. And together, we'll explore the current pandemic through a gender lens to understand how the economic downturn will aggravate existing gender inequalities. I'm happy to share today's conversation with two amazing speakers that walked the talk and made a lot of contribution in closing the gender gap. Lucina Dimeco, who's Senior Director of Girls Education and Gender Equality at Room to Read, and Paula Uniac, Senior Program Officer, Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality at the Asia Foundation. I'll tell you a little more about them right before our fireside chat session. I would also like to introduce my colleague, Will Barkis, who is Principal at OSV, and Will is going to help us during the Q&A session a little later. A few things about logistics. You can enter your question with your first name automatically appearing in the chat area on the right side of your screen. And if you prefer a more private space, you can submit your question using the question area on the right side. And only Lucina, Paula, Will, and I will be able to see your comments. So here's the format of today's discussion, which lasts about 45 minutes. I'll start with an overview on the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality. And after that, we'll move on to a fireside chat with Lucina and Paula, where we'll discuss more about the impact on COVID-19 on women and girls' education in low-income and disadvantaged communities, and why closing the gender digital gap matters. So let's get started. I just wanted to open the conversation with this quote from Antonio Guterres, who's Secretary General of the United Nations. COVID-19 is not only challenging global health systems, but testing our common humanity. Gender equality and women's rights are essential to getting through this pandemic together, to recovering faster, and to building a better future for everyone. Talking about gender inequalities and the gender digital divide is particularly important in these difficult times as we try to fight a global pandemic, and where digital technology have become a lifeline. Unfortunately, we'll see during that webinar that the crisis may in fact reinforce the gender gap. As we know, COVID-19 is leading to a major global economic downturn. In recent recessions, such as the one in 2008, job losses for men were much higher than for women. This image is from the 19th website, a non-profit newsroom reporting on gender and politics. They are talking about America's first female recession and how in 4 months, women lost a decade's worth of economic advancement. They estimated that women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable to this crisis than men's jobs. So why is the impact on gender equality different this time? A recent study conducted by the Northwestern University shows that there is 2 main reasons of why this crisis is affecting women and men differently. The first one is based on the sector of unemployment. In contrast to previous crises, women's employment is at greater risk than men. Globally, 40% of all employed women work in sectors negatively affected by the pandemic, including accommodation and food services, wholesale and retail trade, and administrative activities, as you can see on the graph from the International Labour Organization on the right. The latest McKinsey analysis on COVID-19 and gender equality shows that female jobs are 90% more at risk than male ones. And they also estimate that if no action is taken to counter these effects, the global GDP growth could be 1 trillion lower in 2030 than if women's unemployment simply matched that of men in each sector. On the other hand, taking action now to advance gender equality could be valuable by adding 13 trillion to global GDP in 2030. The second reason of why women are more impacted by the pandemic is that childcare requirements are much higher. Schools are closed, daycares are closed, and other informal care performed by grandparents, friends, or neighbors is also being discouraged in order to slow down the spread of the virus. This time around, it's really down to the parents, and that often means women more than men. First, because there is many more single moms than single dads, but also because among couples raising kids together, women still provide the majority of the childcare. To get a clear picture of the importance of school closures, we note that there are currently 74 million of children under 19 in the United States. Of these, 70% lives in two-parent families, while most of the other live in a single-parent house. As you can see on the chart, 21% of all children live only with their mother, compared to 4% living only with their father. So if schools in the US stay closed for an extended period of time, and single moms can't work, then 20% of children are at an even greater risk of living in poverty. The current crisis is also affecting women disproportionately when it comes to unpaid care work. As you can see on the graph, the International Labour Organization shows that women around the world perform around 4.5 hours of unpaid care work every day, compared to 1.5 for men. Another study conducted by the Eurofunds shows that 11% of women reported that family responsibilities prevented them from devoting the required time to do their jobs during the pandemic. The same study reports that even whether parents have flexible work arrangements and whether fathers can work from home, women continue to do more unpaid care and domestic work, regardless of flexible working conditions during COVID-19. We're not going to look at the impact of COVID-19 on older people and more specifically older women. This recent article from Forbes shows that according to employment data, women over 55 years old face a dual threat to their careers and earning financial power. The Department of Labor's Bureau shared that between March and April, the unemployment rate for women aged 55 and over rose from 3% to 15%. The self-isolation particularly affects older women. On average, women over 80 are twice likely to live alone as men. They also have less access and experience to digital technology and have less pension support than men at the same age. So all of these factors combined shows that women are overrepresented among both older people, paid and unpaid care works. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, a lot of emerging data and reports have shown that domestic violence has intensified. The latest report on violence against women from the United Nations shows that 243 million women and girls have been subjected to sexual or physical violence committed by an intimate partner in the last 12 months. Even before the pandemic hit, we knew that violence against women happens to 1 out of every 3 women in her lifetime. And the pandemic highlighted the fact that home is not a safe space for everyone. Lockdowns and social distancing have made it more difficult for domestic violence survivors to distance themselves from their homes. In one weekend, the UK domestic abuse helplines went up by 65%. Emergency calls for domestic violence cases have increased by 30% in France and 25% in Argentina. The United Nations Women Shadow Pandemic Reports shows that the global cost of violence against women and girls is estimated at approximately 2% of GDP. That's around $1.5 trillion. And that figure can only be rising as violence increases now and will continue after the pandemic. Let's now dive a little more into the gender-digital divide and remote education. As sheltering in place has gone from weeks to months now, we have seen how critical it is to have strong internet connection. With limited face-to-face interaction, life is now lived online. Roughly half of adults says that internet has been essential to them during the COVID-19 outbreak. We know that 43 million Americans lack high-speed internet access. And you can see the chart on the right gives state-by-state data on estimated number of people that were without fixed broadband access in 2020. As you can see, Texas more than 4 million, California more than 2 million, and so forth. We also know that this disparity hits lower income people harder, as nearly half of Americans without home internet are in Black and Latinos households. Looking now at the digital divide through a gender lens, on average, women use digital technology less often than men. According to data from the International Telecommunication Union, the proportion of women using the internet in 2019 was 48% against 58% for men. In low and middle income countries, more than 400 million women are unconnected and 165 million fewer women on a mobile phone compared with men. A recent article from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation emphasized the fact that we don't have enough data when it comes to the pandemic and its effect on women and girls. As COVID-19 increases everyone's reliance on the internet, women will suffer more as they have less access to digital tools and services. Another problem that many educators have been mentioning for years, but this is made more public by COVID-19, is what we call the homework gap. During last spring, there were more than 55 million students impacted by school closures, and it looks like the majority of California students will be starting the new year online. Nearly 70% of teachers assign homework that requires broadband access. And a recent study from Broadband Now shows that 45% of low-income students do their homework on a cell phone. The major problem here is that with 44 million Americans that have filed for unemployment since the crisis, how many more children will be on this side of the homework gap if their parents cannot afford connect to the internet? And this problem is impacting more minority and low-income children. The Wall Street Journal reports that remote learning is widening the education gap. During the pandemic, some schools in Philadelphia have suggested that parents sit in the school parking lot with their children in order to access Wi-Fi. In Detroit, 90% of the family don't have a device or internet connection to access online classes. In Oakland, the district estimates that 25,000 kids need sort of connected device. And in some cases, even if given laptop or hotspots from their school, the digital divide is about more than just getting a device. Some kids don't grow up with a computer at home and they are not 100% competent at using the technology. So on that topic, I'll be closing the overview part of today's discussion, and this is actually a perfect transition to start the fireside chat, as our speakers will be discussing about COVID-19's impact on gender, digital divide, and the education work that they've been doing with low-income and disadvantaged communities in Asia and Africa. So I have some questions prepared for them, and my colleague Will be actively monitoring the chat and questions tab on your screen. So please don't hesitate to enter your question as we go. So first, some background on our first guest. I had the pleasure to meet Lucina at one of Orange Silicon Valley Women in Tech event last year, and I'm really excited to have her with us today. Lucina currently serves as Senior Director for Girls Education and Gender Equality at Room to Read. Room to Read is an international nonprofit promoting gender equality through education. She's also the co-founder of the Gender Breakfast, a network of gender equality experts based in San Francisco, and she writes on the relation between women leaders and social media. Our second speaker today is Paula Uniacke, Senior Program Officer, Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality at the Asia Foundation. She supports their program on women and girls education, economic opportunities, climate resilience, political leadership, and rights and safety. Before that, she used to work for a women's rights organization in India and conducted research on global activism to end gender-based violence. So let's get things started, and maybe you can tell a little bit about your work and what challenges you're seeing, girls and women face at this time in the countries where you work due to COVID-19. And maybe we can start with you, Lucina.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Alice. Room to Read has been working for over 20 years with children across various countries around the world, particularly in Africa and Asia. And our work normally has been in public schools. So right when the pandemic started and we began realizing that so many schools were closing, we realized that children were going to face incredible challenges. When it comes to girls, the challenges are even greater because they already face inequality in their communities and sometimes even in their families. If maybe there's just so much data that can be used, generally the girls are going to be the last ones to have access to them, just because they are not always necessarily considered as a priority and their education is often not prioritized. And so as soon as the pandemic started, we began doing research and surveys among our girls. And we did realize that many of them were having very big challenges following up with their studies. Again, because of the difficulty in accessing data and accessing classes, because of the increased home chores that they had, having to support their families. And also we realized that many of them were really scared of not being able to return to school for a variety of different reasons. And the loss of a job within the family was one of them. So right now we have surveyed over 20,000 girls, and so that, over 40% of them were reporting that someone in their family lost income due to COVID. And those were families that were living with $1 a day. And you can only imagine the type of impact that such a loss can have. In the last months, we have been very, very active in trying to reach out to those girls and support them through individual mentoring over the phone, delivering classes via television and radio, and just really being in touch with them as much as we could via WhatsApp and other platforms, because we really think it's a critical time. And there is a real risk that we have learned from other crises, like the Ebola crisis, that girls that might, miss school opportunities and educational opportunities now might never return to school with incredible negative later outcomes for their lives. So it's a very harrowing situation. The good side is, though, that there are many things that we can do with increased investments, and we should do them.
Thanks for sharing, Lucina. Paula, do you want to share a little bit about your work and what you're seeing happening in Asia?
Sure, thanks, Elise, and good morning, everyone. The Asia Foundation is an international nonprofit organization working for over 65 years to advance good governance, economic growth, environmental resilience, international cooperation, and to advance women's and girls' empowerment and gender equality in 18 countries across Asia and the Pacific. Within my program, we work specifically to support women and girls to exercise their voice and leadership in their families, communities, economies, and countries. And this includes expanding education and economic opportunities, increasing rights and freedom from violence, and advancing women's leadership in political and public life. Regarding the challenges we're seeing during COVID, through our on-the-ground presence and deep local partnerships, we're seeing very acute impacts of the pandemic on women and girls in the communities where we work. As Lucina said, girls' education in many parts of Asia has been massively disrupted with the shift to virtual schooling and girls trying to access the required technology to attend classes and the isolation that can just come from lockdowns. And we're also seeing how women workers and entrepreneurs are suffering a disproportionate loss of economic security, especially those in the informal and gig economies. And some are having to navigate learning how to pivot to online work or finding online platforms for work, but without the information or digital skills or resources to do so easily. And also, as you mentioned earlier, Elise, in the countries where the Asia Foundation works, we've seen dramatic increases in violence against women as shelter-at-home orders exacerbate unequal power relations, heighten economic and mental health pressures, and restrict movement. And at the same time, services for these survivors of violence have been hugely disrupted or at maximum capacity while they shift to sort of expanding phone or virtual hotlines and support services. We actually recently hosted a webinar on this topic, so I can share that in the chat later if people are interested in looking at it. So at the same time as we're seeing, the gender digital divide preventing women and girls from accessing all of these essential services for education and health and economic inclusion in a time when most of the world went virtually overnight. And overall, we're seeing that the need to support women and girls to increase their access to technology and information, to digital skill building, and to virtual support as they face these challenges during the pandemic is more crucial than ever.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess my second question will be where do you see the greatest gaps in supporting girls' education and addressing the digital divide, as you mentioned, Paula, and what can really, be done to better address this?
Shall I start, or do you want to start, Paula?
You can start, Lucina. I'm having some issues muting and unmuting myself.
We have read so often about all the problems that COVID is creating, and the data is becoming stronger and stronger. At the same time, though, we aren't really seeing as much in terms of getting data that is really disaggregated by sex and having a real focus on the impact on girls. And so there is an area there definitely where, the gap is very big. And also we aren't really seeing very many programs that are taking advantage of this moment to create something that's new and new in a gender transformative manner. The reason why we care so much about working with girls, and we know the importance of working with girls, is that girls face additional and very specific vulnerabilities. And they face those vulnerabilities because of gender inequality in our society. So here is an opportunity to actually create programs, be it radio programs that try to build resilience in girls, or be it, mentoring programs that try to support girls so that they can envision a better future for themselves. We see an opportunity to actually create such programs in a way that they can really be gender transformative, that they can not only benefit the girls that reach them, but also the overall structure in our society and boys and girls' understanding of the roles of men and women and the gender equality in our society. So on our side, we see definitely a lack of focus on programs that have this gender transformative nature, a lack of data, and overall, a lack of investments really around programs that specifically are having this dimension and looking at girls and boys and girls with this dimension of, gender sensitivity and gender transformation.
Yeah, I'd like to really echo and agree with the gaps that Lucina's identified. I would say in addition to those, in the countries where we work, we've also seen how critical really holistic and tailored support is for high school and university students that we work with. They typically come from rural, more low-income communities across Asia, and it's not enough just to think about providing scholarships in terms of just tuition support. Prior to the pandemic, and especially now, we're really seeing how essential it is to go beyond just ensuring that girls and young women are able to get into the classroom, which of course now looks a little different in a COVID reality. So the ways that we've had to adjust, for instance, in Cambodia, to some of these challenges of girls, not being able to get into the classroom, maybe not being able to access technology. Well, in Cambodia, for instance, there's a 34% gender gap in cell phone ownership. And so, there is a really extreme gender digital divide, and we're working to ensure that our young women scholars can still make progress towards their degrees and their future careers in leadership and STEM fields. And so this includes, we're providing housing support for students who are facing increased financial insecurity due to the pandemic, and living stipends so that they can purchase essential items like food and sanitation supplies. And this helps to relieve a lot of stress that the young women and their families may be facing, so that they can focus just on their studies and on staying healthy during this time. And we're also providing laptops and internet credits so students can attend online classes, complete their assignments, keep in touch with their classmates. We have found that sort of networking support, even prior to the pandemic, is really, really critical to helping girls and young women sort of support each other and share study strategies, or sort of brainstorm what career paths might look like. And so we want to really fight off the isolation that could come with everyone facing shelter in place orders. And of course, this access to technology also helps to build new digital skills, as girls and young women are sort of learning to engage with the internet or with technology in a different way. We're also providing virtual mentoring to help students with this transition to online learning and to continue to receive tutoring. A really hallmark feature of the work that we try and the support that we try and provide girls and young women is one-on-one mentoring to really help girls sort of identify challenges that they may be facing in their studies, in their families. They face a lot of competing pressures during this time of their lives. And we also work really, really diligently to build sort of soft and professional skills for girls and young women, including critical thinking and teamwork and leadership and communication skills. And we want to ensure that there's not going to be a gap in both the sort of formal in the classroom learning and this more informal, but really equally as important if you think about success in the classroom and beyond the classroom, in different career pathways, or just in girls and young women's families and societies and economies. And so in all, we're trying to ensure that in an increasingly digital global economy, a trend that's only being accelerated by the pandemic, that the girls and young women we support are set up for success. Particularly now during the pandemic, but also thinking about what the world might look like beyond that.
Yes, and I also, to say, related to what Paula, was just mentioning, that I think that there is really a kind of like an emergency response part of this and a long-term strategy, and both of them have to work in a way that's really not parallel, but complement one another. So in the short term, for example, also we are really relying on phone, calling girls at home, calling their parents at home to remind them that it's important for girls to continue school, having those one-on-one conversations that take a lot of time and presence on the ground and are really important, a snail mail, sending homework packages and kind of like books, anything that the girls can read that can help them keep up, with their work, radio, television, all these media, are still there and are there right now and are there in a way that is sometimes not the case for the digital yet. So this is a part that's really key, and we're taking care of that right now to continue, supporting our girls. And then at the same time, we also, as an organization, but also as a society more broadly, need to work towards bridging the gender digital divide, and doing so also in a way that really transforms digital and, for example, transforms the internet. The internet as it is today doesn't truly serve women and girls very well, for a number of different reasons, for a number of different challenges they face there, such as human trafficking, such as online harassment. And we must make sure that as we look at that long-term recovery, we also look at improving both the skills of girls to know what they're going to face when they go online, when they open an account in many of the media platforms, or, and at the same time also really create a critical mass of boys and girls that are going to be able to demand a better internet and a better society overall.
That's excellent, Lucia. And just to reiterate one more point that you made previously about thinking about longer term change that needs to occur to have true gender transformation. And you mentioned working with, girls and with boys, and to change gender norms. And that is something that, when we think about the immediate context of the pandemic, is there's the emergency response, and it can seem a little hard to focus on, okay, how do, there's so much focus on we need to have the technology now and we need to have the digital skills component, but thinking long term, it is really important not to lose that aspect of how do we truly change, thinking about girls being able to, what comes after school, even in terms of different career paths and leadership within their families and communities. There's that extreme unequal gender norms that exist, and those really need to be addressed. One thing that we've been working to support prior to the pandemic and now are working to think about how does this work continue in a more virtual capacity is it's called the Gender Lab for Boys. This is a pilot program that we've supported in India where it works with adolescent boys on one hand, and there's also a girls leadership component. It helps young people really examine gender biases and unequal social norms that exist that they maybe haven't really had the tools to interrogate before, and to think about, okay, how can we redefine gender equality? How can we redefine, toxic masculinity norms? How can we think about the relationship between boys and boys differently, between boys and girls differently, so that in the future there's, hopefully the next generation will be able to have more equal gender relations and more gender equality, but also to be able to influence, other generations, older generations, their parents and society around them. And that's something that we're giving a lot of thought about. Okay, that previously has had a very big sort of service learning community orientation, and how do you think about shifting that to in an increasingly remote world, at least during the pandemic situation. So I think that work is really fundamental and something to continue to figure out.
Thank you for sharing. It's really interesting. I guess I'm just thinking about, what kind of how the gender digital divide, is related to women's economic empowerment, in Asia for you, Paula, and Lucina as well. I'm sure you can also answer to that question, but if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, even before the pandemic, STEM and business fields were already areas with tremendous growth potential, especially in Asia. For instance, Southeast Asia has the world's fastest growing internal market, and even pre-COVID, the digital economy was expected to be worth $200 billion in that region by 2025. And as many as 80% of jobs requiring basic digital literacy and ICT skills by 2030. So while this obviously creates vast job opportunities, it's also critical to prepare the next generation of women in Asia to be able to enter and progress in these high growth industries. So the gender digital divide was already a dire disadvantage. And as we've been discussing, as COVID has moved so many aspects of daily life online and is likely to generate an even higher demand for digitally related skills and jobs, this lack of connectivity has become even more alarming. And this means that the digital divide has the potential to become an even greater source of inequality post-COVID, and that women and girls will be left even further behind. So this is particularly true for women and girls across many parts of Asia who lack access to technology, who lack support and opportunities to build those required digital skills, and lack support to enter STEM and ICT skills as well to truly excel in the growing digital economy. In some parts of Asia, women are 26% less to own a phone than men are, and women represent less than a quarter of STEM researchers across most parts of Asia and the Pacific. And in Cambodia, for instance, where I told you a little bit about our education programs before, just 14% of those working in STEM-related fields are women. So beyond STEM careers, women entrepreneurs and women working in non-STEM fields also increasingly require digital skills, tools, and services, including online financial services and access to technology. And so this is why it's so important to address some of the fundamental barriers that contribute to the gender digital divide, such as we've talked about addressing gender stereotypes, expanding digital and internet access, investing in STEM and ICT education and career programs for girls and young women. And this is why the Asia Foundation's work always brings in considerations of digital needs and requirements to support women as entrepreneurs, as workers, and as participants in all parts of the economy, because it's just the digital divide is so relevant and so impactful for women's economic opportunities and empowerment.
Yes, and at Room to Read, we look at things even, in some ways from a more primary element. We believe that one of the biggest issues is that many girls just simply don't see themselves and do not have role models to be able to see themselves in a professional manner. And so most of the girls that we work with across Asia and Africa, they are the first ones attending secondary school in their family. So when you ask them which kind of future they envisage for themselves, it's very hard for them to even just imagine to become a teacher. Because the only people they see are the women in their communities that didn't have many opportunities, and therefore just even thinking of a broader future for themselves seems impossible. And so we work with them through 7 years. Room to Read has programs that are, working with girls from when they are around the age of 12 until when they're around the age of 17 or 18 to really build their life skills and their self-confidence, self-awareness, critical thinking, and get them ready for a professional life, either for meaningful work or tertiary education. And actually the majority of our alumni in the year upon graduation, they immediately either start working or enroll into tertiary education, and in most occasions it's actually both, because they need to work to support their families and themselves. And at the same time, they also, continue their study. They haven't lost the dream of their education. And so we think it's really important at this moment in time not to lose sight of that dream and to keep following those girls so that they can continue growing in those skills. those skills, those life skills, as we call them, are really, really important, and are really important for later life outcomes, including women's economic empowerment, the type of jobs that girls have. They are really, really crucial. Last year, we had the results of a randomized control trial we did in India, and we found that even only in 2 years, with life skills and mentoring of girls showed much higher levels of self-awareness, much higher levels of self-confidence. They did grow in critical thinking. They began to think of a different path for themselves, and that was only in 2 years. So that's really also talks of the importance of not forgetting this critical work around girls' life skills, even at this time, and if anything, more than ever at this time, when they're really, when their resilience in many ways is being tested. And for example, resilience is one of the core components of our curriculum. What we have done, among several other pivots, have been radio programs where we invite our alumni, for example, in Nepal, to share their stories. And those are girls that really overcame incredible odds to be able to complete secondary school and then even going to tertiary. We have an alumna that is right now a nurse, and her parents didn't want her to go back really to do her job. Given the pandemic, they were terribly scared. And her testimony was so powerful, because she was like, this is what I've been preparing for. This is the way of giving back to my community. And so, it's really important to build those foundational skills with girls so that they can have the courage and strength and arguments to really have those conversations with their parents, for staying in school, for having jobs, with their future husbands, with their larger community, for really being able to accomplish their full potential and give back to society with everything that they can give. So I see really the need for a renewed focus on building those life skills at this time.
So thank you so much for your insight, Lucina, and you too, Paula. I can see that we have a lot of questions from the audience, so maybe we're gonna move on to the Q&A part of today's discussion. So I will let you take over and maybe share with us the questions.
Sure. So thank you all. That was really insightful discussion and super important, obviously. So I'm going to bucket a couple of questions together because I think they kind of fit. Have you seen girls dropping out of school during the pandemic? And if so, like, what are the reasons you've heard? And I'll bucket that with, kind of combine that with, do you have any information on how women's rest, kind of mental health, wellness, well-being, has been affected or reduced during the pandemic? So yeah, bucket those together. Maybe Lucina, I don't know if that's more up your alley.
Sure, I can absolutely start. Yes, definitely. We already know of girls, for example, that were married off during the pandemic because all of a sudden parents were really concerned regarding particularly the need for supporting them financially after the pandemic, when families lost their jobs. And so we already know that girls are dropping off, particularly the girls that are hardest to reach. That, it's that the girls whose families might be migrating at this point, or, might consider migration because of their dire economic circumstances. So there definitely is, there is a reality that is very, very problematic and concerning. We have done a survey of our girls' reasons for concern for not returning to school, and definitely the loss of income is a big one. So those are girls whose, pull in some ways to start working right now, get married, so you do not have to be perceived as an economic burden for your family. Like those pulls are very, very strong. And so we hear that there is a real concern in our girls, the missing also opportunities for studying. That's also a big one, and it's as simple as really knowing that many of these girls might not even have electricity. And so if you're working during the day to support your family, with taking care of younger siblings and so on, and then you have the need to study at night, and then there isn't even that that enabling environment, from that to just even the stress. And so in those conversations we've had with girls, one-on-ones, again, because we are trying to reach them and to talk to them over the phone every couple of weeks for each one of them, we hear them really being very distressed. Some of them, being in situations where their families really don't know what they're going to do next, might not have enough to eat. Certainly, many opportunities might not have even had access to any type of homework or anything that might make them think that they can return to school and not fail. So the situation is actually quite dire, both on the side of their mental wellness and on the side of, their really the concern. Again, I don't want to paint a picture that's hopeless, because I know and there are many things that can be done. It's just that there need to be this investment, frankly, from countries in their education services, seen not only as the returning to school, and not even only as providing certain classes via radio and so on, but making sure that the girls also can access those classes in the circumstance when they might not, have the opportunity of even getting to that information on that online class or television class and so on. And so that's where, for us, a big difference has been the contacting the girls one-on-one, making the telephone call, talking to the parents one-on-one, having known the parents. Room to Read has worked in those countries for 20 years. And so, having that one-on-one connection is really, really important. It's time consuming, but it's the only thing that, that's gonna save many of those girls.
Yeah, super interesting. I want to, I would love to talk about this forever, but we jump to the second set of questions, which I think is a good set to end on, because they're all sort of related to, like, what can we do, essentially. So I'll combine three questions into one, which is basically, how can we leverage a crisis to accelerate digitalization and reduce the digital gender gap? And maybe at a level of companies, like, what's the role for like C-level executives, and what are the things they can do? Are there specific digital tools? Are there workplace policies, culture, things like that? And then related was a question about, besides from financial contributions, how can corporations support these initiatives? So it's basically, what can we do about this? Or is this an opportunity to do something, I think?
I think there definitely is. I'll just jump in here first. I suppose I can answer in part with an example. We have, during COVID, launched a brand new project across 10 countries in Southeast Asia in partnership with Google.org. It's sort of a really cool first of its kind collaboration between business, government, and nonprofit, really to address the gender digital divide issues that we're seeing during COVID. It specifically focuses on women and young people, especially women, small and micro entrepreneurs, to build digital skills to succeed in the digital economy and to help minimize some of the impacts of COVID, especially for those who are living in rural and isolated areas. And so this is accomplished through digital trainings and tools that are really customized depending on local needs and contexts. And it includes sort of one-on-one trainings with a focus on digital skills for entrepreneurs and for job seekers, as well as follow-on mentoring. As Lucina said, the one-on-one mentoring and any sort of education is so critical. And then also guidance on online safety. And so it's quite exciting in terms of scale and the timeliness of the intervention, of course. Overall, the project will provide trainings for 200,000 people, of which 120,000% or 60% will be women. And so this is one example of being very reactive to the current crisis at hand and trying to have a targeted approach to addressing just some of what we're seeing. Obviously, the challenges that we've been discussing are much greater, but this is one approach that at least the Asia Foundation has partnered with private partners as well as government partners to sort of address these issues, some of them head on, and to try and set women in particular up for at least better success now and post-pandemic. Right, these skills will be valuable even in whatever the world looks like when we're through all of this. And I would say that does require financial support from our partners, but also a partnership in terms of thinking about, okay, what tech or ICT tools can our business partners provide? What sort of expertise can employees provide to help strengthen these trainings and make them really customized and applicable to the people who are receiving them and who we want to benefit in as many ways as possible.
Yeah, and for me, I would definitely say, try to learn as much as possible and just get in touch. In terms of Room to Read, we have several, happy partnership with a number of private companies and financial institutions like Credit Suisse or various foundations across the world, the IKEA Foundation. And, in all cases, it's also about trying to see where the interest is, where there is the greatest opportunity for learning together about something, whether it is trying to look at efficiencies. And we are, right now really pivoting so many of our programs to try and see how can we take advantage of, in some ways, the limitations of this situation to see and set up tools that then we can use forever, and we are again improving, for example, our radio programs and looking at ways that we can reach boys and girls through radio, that we can do that through television and in partnership with the national government and national television broadcasters in Bangladesh. So it's really about finding a fit and finding what feels the truest, to your heart as a company, truest to your heart, kind of like as an employee, where you are most drawn to and where you would like to contribute, and then find really this shared opportunity for learning and really supporting each other's work. So more than anything, I'd say to get in touch and learn. And again, on the Room to Read side, we're happy always to receive requests. We have several, including chapters that can promote a very individual learning experience, and to see whether we are maybe the right fit to partner with you, and if we aren't, we are happy to point you in the direction of others that might be.
And I would say that's the Asia Foundation's approach as well. It's all about building sustainable partnerships that work for everybody at hand, right? And especially for the communities that we're trying to support through our work, our mutual work.
Cool. I would love to ask questions all morning, and there are more in the chat, but I think we're past our time. So I'm gonna hand it back to Alice. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you both for all of these insights. And I guess, before we close, I just wanted to summarize our discussions. And, as we saw today, I guess that, yes, we should be worried about the impact of COVID-19 on the gender implication for the next normal. But this new virtual world could very much, as we saw, prevent women from accessing services for education, professional development, health, and financial inclusion. So what we really need to do is to leverage digital technologies as an integral part of our efforts to close the digital gender gap. And as company, you can decide to look, for innovation and scalable ideas in those following areas that we mentioned, that Paula and Lucina mentioned a little before. But you can look into digital skills, so seek for solutions that supports the development of digital skills by women and girls to make sure that they can fully participate in a digital economy. We can also look at digital access, so look for solutions that use innovating business models to make it easier for women to access and use the technologies. The content is also important. Increase the availability of women and girls-oriented content. And the last one will be around diversity and inclusion. So first, look at existing platforms that you already use and make them more inclusive, and get more data to help policies. And the next step will be to look for solutions that increase the availability of relevant digital platforms catering to women. And at OSB, we'll be following on what we saw today, and we'll continue to this discussion as part of our X-Force Tracking Trend Corporate Program. So, if you're interested in collaborating with us, we also have our Women in Tech initiative, and we organize events. So please don't hesitate to reach out to my colleagues, David and Helen. Their informations are on the slides. And I just wanted to finish and give a special thanks to Paula and Lucina for today's insight. Thank you for sharing with us. And yeah, I just hope that, today's conversation is going to jumpstart conversation with your colleagues, family, and friends. And we really need to keep this conversation going. Thank you, everyone. And I'm sure I'll hear from you soon.
Thank you.